have today with us Alissa Torres. She is one of the SANS forensics gurus. She teaches the SANS forensics and memory forensics class. So I'm happy to have her here. So I live here with one of the smartest people I know in forensics.
Rock star!
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I got the opportunity, getting a lot more sophisticated, and what I've seen when I was doing incident response is these techniques down here, anti-forensics, way more common now than they were in the past. So what you used to find is if they cleaned up at all, if the attackers cleaned up at all once they were done with the box, it was they would delete a tool. They would delete whatever malware was running on the box, and where can you pull out deleted files? Can you pull out, can you recover these things if they've just been deleted? Yeah, exactly. What we're seeing now, though, is file batch wipers or batch file wipers. If something's been wiped from a machine, can you recover it?
Yes.
You think so? If the clusters that contain the data, the evil, have been overwritten with random bytes or null bytes, can you go back and pull it back off? You can find, perhaps you're thinking you can find evidence that it was once there. And that is what I'm going to give you a couple techniques to use. But typically, what we're seeing is very sophisticated techniques by the attackers to include batch file wiping. So you go, you know that their toolkit was there in this particular directory, and you just can't recover it. It's a sad state of affairs, and that's why you have to rely on the network guys. Who are doing full PCAP, they're capturing the network data traffic as it's coming inbound. How common is full PCAP or full packet capture?
Not common at all.
It's not common enough. You're right. You're right. And typically they'll do full PCAP when there's an alert, right? Then they'll start capturing. So it's hard to reconstruct. So that's one of the problems with the anti-forensics techniques that are being employed. Of course, time stomping. What is time stomping?
Modifying time?
Yeah, manipulating the time and date stamps of particular files. So these are all standing in the way of us doing an excellent job of investigating what the user or the attacker did on the box. So, you know, whatever strategies the adversary is going to employ, highly dependent upon the mission. Someone describe to me what different techniques might be employed by the anonymous crew versus my sophisticated adversary. What techniques, how are they going to differ? Anonymous is typically what? Do they want to maintain presence on the network?
No.
You might say that anonymous and those sort of hacktivists are smash and grab, right? Because they want to quickly pull off, and where do they put their data that they've pasted in? Yeah, it's more for the fame, right? I'm not to sing a Lady Gaga song, but it's more for the fame of it. It's not for persistence and constantly tapping intellectual property in research. So, my sophisticated adversary as an attacker is going to exhibit way different techniques than the smash and grab adversary. And likewise, we will see and be able to pick out those different strategies as we kind of upend and reverse what they've done on the network. So yeah, I divide these up into sophisticated adversary and the commodity. When I worked at Mandiant, it was always sad to find commodity malware. And you know, commodity malware is something that's not targeted, it's not customized, it's more banking Trojan. I mean, and typically our customers wouldn't pay for analysis of commodity malware. They wouldn't pay to see whether it had spread throughout the network because they weren't after. The target of commodity malware was not intellectual property. It wasn't the company itself, but it was the customer or the user's data, the employee's data. So they're like, we're not going to pay for that. Just wipe the machine and roll it back out. So I point to the two different types of malware, two different adversaries, and largely we always wanted the sophisticated adversary stuff because that was the cool stuff, right? That was it. Man, it was like, have you spotted APT yet? No. Well, then you're not a real incident responder. That was the badge of honor that you got when you worked in Mandiant. So a little bit more about being an incident responder. You know, the adversary, they have to maybe own one box, laterally move, accomplish their mission, and exfil the data. It sounds hard, but I like to say that the incident responder has a much harder job. Much harder job because we have to tell the whole story. Typically, if we are, boss that wants to know, needs to feed data up the chain, or we're providing services. We're providing services to our customers who have been owned and we go in. We need to answer the following questions. What was the initial vector of infection? The whole, how did this happen? What privileged credentials were obtained? Why do they need to know that? So yeah, you can identify the accounts that were owned, compromised, and see what other machines the accounts were used on, right? So that's an essential part of our investigation. Which systems were involved? This is called proper scoping. If you do not properly scope an intrusion, what are you left with? You think you've remediated and you know you haven't. You've only identified the tip of the iceberg, to use an analogy. What was searched for and why? So now we're talking about, I'm being paid to figure out why the attacker came, what was he looking for. Next, what was taken and how? So when did it leave, which egress point did it leave through? And extent of the compromise and offer a remediation plan. I say incident responders have a harder job than attackers. Some people might disagree, but yeah, I have to reconstruct what the attacker did. The attacker only has to accomplish his one mission. So threat intelligence here. Dude, if you were in here with Kyle Maxwell's presentation, you know all about threat intelligence. So you would know, this is a little dark, but this is called the kill chain. My brothers in arms cannot answer this question, but I have I have shirts to give away. I know, those two cannot answer this question. Who created the kill chain model? Who is the individual who's responsible for the kill chain? There's a white paper that was written. This gentleman works at Lockheed Martin, one of the government contractors who actually is doing things right. No, if you have your laptops, is anyone online? Is anyone surfing? Come on, get your phones out. There's a shirt involved. I'm about to give away something. This is the kill chain model for exploitation, threat intelligence gathering. Seriously. No one's looking down.
They're all searching.
All right, dude.
This is an OSINT challenge, folks.
Yeah, open source intelligence.
Yes, Googling.
No.
All right, here's another one. And this is really going to be shameful if you don't know this. We talk about style and grace on once the attacker gets on the remote network. There are a lot of post-exploitation modules in Metasploit. And some of you have said you use Metasploit. There is one called ARP Scanner. What does ARP Scanner do? Yeah. So I own the machine. I can friggin' throw out a post-exploitation module and do an ARP scan from the remote system that I own. I'm looking for all the MAC addresses. Who is this machine talking to, and who can I identify? Who wrote that post-exploitation module?
HD more, I think.
Keep on going with your guesses. This gentleman also wrote a persistence post-exploitation module. Also wrote, this one will really give it away. Pal, what is his name? What is his name? Carlos Perez. You didn't get anything yesterday, did you? Did you get a shirt yesterday? You did? You got a shirt yesterday? Well, this guy on the end did. All right. I think the guy on the end was the one that was yeah. You said it first. You just, no? He's like, no, he didn't. I don't know the guy. Carlos, so the answer, Dark Operator, Carlos Perez, in the room. You didn't know you were being graced by his presence. Freaking, how many of these posting, I know, I'm embarrassing him. I'm getting paid to do this. No.
I think we all do, but they're all here and talking for the last few minutes.
Post-exploitation modules. How many did you write? How many have you written?
Around 33.
33? Holy crap.
80 scripts, mixed scripts, plus a bunch of libraries.
Damn! Hats off to you. That's awesome. So good job. You guys know. Some of you know. So that's really cool. So you know what? I'll come back and I'll talk to this slide. Threat intelligence, I teach the 508 class. I have all kinds of security professionals that come to my class, and some of them have been owned. I try to comfort them. In this kill chain, what you're seeing is that post-exploitation, the whole process that leads up to the actions that the adversary would take. So he has to do reconnaissance, weaponization, and delivery of the exploit, and then the exploit actually has to succeed. Installation of maybe the second stage of malware or the toolkit, and then you have beaconing out to the command and control server. So this whole, he's kind of laid it out in a chain, kill chain. It's where you catch the adversary in the kill chain. They kind of, based on, it's Mike Cloppert that put this together. Anyone heard that name, Mike Cloppert? Well, now you have, man. You'll get it right next time. Mike Cloppert says there's actually something to be gained from being owned to the point where, you know, patient 0 is beaconing out to the command and control server. Something to be gained in that you can reverse all of the techniques the adversary used to get to your network. Now, if you stopped it earlier, if you stopped it upon delivery, say it was an email attachment, and it was caught coming inbound, what are you missing? What are you unable to reconstruct or find out about your adversary?
So the exfiltration, what it was
Yeah.
for, how he got out.
Exactly, exactly. So you,
Picture.
right. Maybe where that second stage malware or his toolkit would be dropped. Because we know about the sophisticated adversary, from what I can gather, there are schools that the nation-state entities, they actually send their operators through schools that teach them different techniques. And, you know, as all schools, you're graded on how effective you are. So if you're brought up saying you will fail unless you exhibit these particular techniques, like unless you use this directory for your malware, unless you exhibit this technique when you get on the remote system, you know, you're indoctrinated into different ways of acting once you get remote shell on the box. So like Kyle was kind of talking about, being able to create this portfolio, this behavioral analysis of your adversary, it definitely behooves you, depending or irregardless of how you're going to use this knowledge as you gather it. I liked that. So yeah, even Cloppert says there's something to be gained by being this owned. I like to reassure people. It's not a bad thing. It's actually worth money to be this owned. Yay! All right, so I introduced you to the attacker's methodology. This is probably something you've seen before. As you know, it's stage by stage, and pen testers use this methodology as well as they're going through the whole pen testers being paid to test a customer's network. Identify vulnerabilities and thrash it and prove that they can get access to the sensitive data. You know, it's very eye-opening for the customer, but they move through these stages. Which stage is typically not of interest to a pen tester, though? Unless they have a serious problem. Sustaining access, exactly. So pen testers typically aren't interested in that last stage, and that's where we start talking about the sophisticated adversary. The ones that want to hang around, right? So step-by-step information gathering and scanning. So this is open source information gathering, the scanning, finding out vulnerabilities, finding out what you can about that remote network. This is gaining access, delivering the exploits. An entry point into the network is established right there, dumping credentials, and this is what I'm going to focus on, what they do once they get on the remote network. So post-exploitation techniques is going to equal my offensive digital forensics. So through a straw, typically they don't have the benefit of everything GUI, desktop related. So we'll focus on the last two, expanding access and sustaining access. And then I'll show you how you can spot this stuff. So step by step, you've heard the sad stories of typical entry into a network. Normally the initial vector is a spear phishing email. It either contains an attachment or they click on a link, right? And then you have the successful C2 beacon where the owned machine talks outbound and either gets a second stage of malware or additional modules or functionality, might drop toolkits to the box. You see that what happens next is an exploration of the remote network. Awesome. All right. Not to forget about, I need to be able to persist when patient 0 and all of the other machines that I own reboot or shut down for the night. Right? I need to be able to kick off again. So you see all of these are part of securing a foothold in that remote network. So the constraints of the attacker, sometimes the attacker will have, it will be time sensitive, their mission. Right? Sometimes they're actually in competition. Have you heard of this? Yeah, so several organizations will be given a task, and it's a huge achievement, whoever accomplishes the mission first. So we have this, I'm painting a little bit of empathy for the attacker. I said my job was hard, but they have to keep a low profile, time constrictions, or restrictions, and they have to obfuscate their inbound, outbound traffic so as not to set off alerts. I fully acknowledge that. So step by step, we have 4 parts that I'm going to fly through because I have 50 minutes. Thanks to see my buddy Kyle. What's up? I stand between you and lunch. I'm fully aware of that. So I will fly through these, and then I'll get into the forensics and how you can bind these techniques on that system.
What you don't know is that if you tell her that lunch will start earlier, she can talk even faster.
Yes. Yesterday I was doing better though, Jonathan, wasn't I? I was speaking slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was trying to speak slowly yesterday because it was, oh well. Today I've lost that. I've lost my ability to slow down. So for reconnaissance techniques, this is finding out about where the key terrain is on the network. That's the first one I'm going to talk about. But in addition, if you have remote shell in a box, one of the first things you need to do is assess security posture. So you see that the attacker will run a script, or they need to assess, okay, I think it was McAfee based on my open source intelligence that was going to be running this network, McAfee endpoint protection, but let me verify. Let me look for processes, let me look for drivers that are on this remote system. You think they don't do that? Well, they definitely do, and that's the first thing. Because the next thing they're going to drop down is a bunch of tools. They need to know, do I need to kill AV? Do I need to kill particular processes that are running on the box that are going to catch the download of the tools? So that's assessing security posture. Then I need to find the key terrain on the network. Map the network infrastructure. I'm going to query for the domain controller. Why is the domain controller prime real estate?
That has all the creds.
Yeah, it has all the credentials, exactly. So if I locate the file servers, the domain controllers, the network shares, I'm really getting there. I'm really getting to maybe where the sensitive data lies. Sometimes it's an individual that's the target. That sounds kind of eerie. But I'm not kidding. Sometimes they're targeting a particular individual so they can install perhaps a keylogger or some sort of remote access Trojan and follow that individual as they might travel the world, a top executive perhaps, or someone in charge of doing a business deal. That might be the mission, to install a backdoor on their machine. So how do you locate or spot the system that that key individual is using? All of this is the reconnaissance stage. So collecting information about installed software is going to help because I don't want to be caught when I'm dropping stuff on the box. These are my screenshots, easy stuff. So if I had a remote shell in a box, I would run these commands by dropping into a shell. What happens when I drop into a shell? You're thinking interpreter, I would type shell, or I'd kick off a cmd.exe. How have I changed that target system? Well, I'm in an interpreter session, which is solely in memory. We talked about this yesterday, man. It's solely in memory. It's a sweet spot. I'm not touching the file system. I drop into a shell. What have I done?
You started the process.
I started a process that's running from the file system. I've actually loaded up a cmd.exe.
You're touching the disk.
I'm touching the disk. I've left a trail. I know. So this is not the most sophisticated technique. I'm showing you something that's quite common, but it's not stealthy. Because I'm actually echoing environmental variables, but in order to get to this, I need to launch a cmd.exe. And if my point of entry was in memory only, like I injected into a process, I drop into a shell, that's actually changing the system. So realize that, along with, what is reg, query, what have I done here? Query the registry, exactly. So yeah, this is looking for network shares. That might be of interest to me if I'm going to start traversing directory structures. Another thing, I want to know who's on the box. I changed all of my usernames to Dexter Morgan. Anyone familiar with Dexter Morgan? Yeah, it's a good luck charm. Dexter Morgan is from Dexter, the Showtime series. He's always there with me. So these are the active sessions running on a box. They want to know who's on the system. Yes, and they also want to know who's logged into the system ever. Why does that matter?
Because if they touch that account, they're giving themselves away.
If they touch the account, if they reuse an account outside of the pattern of life that's associated with said account, okay, that's good, that's good. What is the difference between a local account and a domain account? A domain user account and a domain admin account? Yeah. What can be done on a network or domain if I have a domain admin account? If I have the credentials?
Everything.
Everything. I could change permissions on shares. I could create additional domain admin accounts. Awesome. So tell me about if a machine has had a domain admin log into it. are those credentials cached? And this relies on Windows knowledge.
Yeah, hash dump.
Difference
Yeah.
version and how they access the box, they might be in memory.
Nice, it could be in memory, but something to note, Windows by default caches 10 domain credentials. This is for the executives that would travel on an airplane and be pissed off if they weren't logged into the network or connected to the network. They want to be able to log in using their domain account, not a local account. They want to log on using their domain account. So Windows by default caches 10 domain credentials. Some of those cached credentials might be domain admin credentials. So cache dump, right? Cache dump is an interpreter or post-exploitation that would go in and harvest these credentials that are kept in the system hive. So based on who is active on the machine or who is logged in the past, it really will be indicative of how valuable that system is. We talked about patient zero is, that's normally not any good, it's just some dummy who clicked the link. But actually, if patient zero has so many problems with his machine, the domain admin or the help desk account has probably logged into his machine to help him. Maybe I could harvest some credentials, which is coming up on the next step here. This is a little bit lighter, but this is me querying the domain controller for the system. So netdom query DC, which domain controller is this system using to validate credentials, to authenticate? So this is typical, just a PowerShell command. What? She did a PowerShell command. I know, Carlos is thinking I'm a PowerShell loser. But I did a little bit, man. I did a little bit. Identify the Dexter account through Active Directory. So I talk a little bit more because I know there's someone in the audience that's like, dude, I wouldn't drop into a shell. No, I wouldn't touch the file system. You're totally right. Malware today offers modules that run only in memory. Some of these, I use Red October as an example. Thousands of post-exploitation modules that are going to be solely in memory. They're going to query the system, but they're not going to touch. They're going to inject code into the process that they're currently running in, and they're going to get the job done by querying memory to pull system information out. So a system information could be something as simple as, is there a mobile device plugged into the system? Why are they interested in like a mobile device? Jump, exactly. Infect the mobile device because where is that user? If they have it plugged into their business system or their workstation at their company, where are they going to plug it into next?
Home.
That's how you get to home, exactly. So you want to know if there's a mobile device plugged in, you can jump to that mobile device and then ride it, infect the home machine, and have the home machine beacon back out to you. Awesome. So that's Red October, and I know that there's a cynic saying a lot of things are riding only in memory. You're totally right. Here's a screenshot. Anyone know what this is? Yeah, shit. It's up there. It's up there. Poison ivy. So this is, I have a couple machines that I have, backdoor into. I want to focus on the left column here. All of these are things I can run on that remote target. So I can do a keylogger. And Poison Ivy is run-of-the-mill. It used to be kind of high speed in, 2001, 2002? It's been around for a very long time. But Poison Ivy offers this console where you can query the system. This is how attackers are getting things done. Of course, Poison Ivy is old school, but very, very similar. Remote access Trojans offer this type of functionality. Awesome stuff. So that was Reconnaissance, the ability to query the remote system and find out more about that network. The second one is small. I won't be spending too much time on these subsequent categories, but data identification and extraction. This is, keyloggers, credential harvesting. Talking more about credential harvesting, what's being used out there today? I was just, hash dump. Where does hash dump get its credentials from? Does it say it there?
Yeah.
The SAM database, where does it get the sys key that it needs to unlock for a shirt? Because I know I have some latent forensicators up in here. Some people who are bound and you're on the path to become a forensic examiner. Where do I get the sys key that will help me decrypt the SAM hive and thereby release the hashes for the passwords for the local accounts? Where do you think the sys key is located? Yes, but which registry hive? There are 5 of them at least. There is the SAM. Help me here. There's a security hive. That's not it. There's a software hive, but that's not it. Which one am I forgetting? She drops the mic. System hive. No one gets it. No one gets it. So there are other techniques. Don't worry. So the system hive is hit. You get the sys key from the system hive. You apply it to the SAM hive. You release the password. That's what's going on when you run hash dump. It's a good thing the person that wrote the hash dump post-exploitation module knew how to get the job done, right? So we have Mimikatz. What's Mimikatz do?
Dump credentials in memory?
Yeah, so it injects into LSASS. LSASS, for some reason or another, actually keeps plain text passwords for users who are logged in. There might be some evidence of users who have had past sessions since, the LSASS process has started, but dude, use Mimikatz and I'm actually able to get plain text password credentials. Do you think attackers are using this type of technique? Yeah, it's exactly. And Mimikatz requires a driver. Typically today I have seen plain text password dumpers require no driver. They just get the job done. Amazing stuff, amazing stuff. So that's what I'm showing you here is one of these plain text password dumpers. I don't have any passwords on one of my VMs, awesome. But you can see I'm able to dump that out. I don't have to crack any hashes. I don't have to, yeah. So that's good stuff and that's current, modern day. Lateral movement techniques. Now, lateral movement techniques could be creating a scheduled task. It could be passing credentials, right? Let's talk about harvesting hash, grabbing the hashes. I can pass the hash. You've heard of this technique, right? What are other lateral movement techniques? It could just be rolling out an exploit. I'm inside the network. Why not exploit something?
Pivoting.
What's that?
Pivoting. Pivoting. I don't know how to say it in English.
When you pivot through a
Pivots! Yeah, exactly. So what I'm showing you here is a reconstruction of event logs that show lateral movement. Where do you think the lateral movement is happening here? It's in one command that's used. Oh, damn, Windows knowledge here. So I got cmd.exe. So he drops into a shell.
Yeah.
And he runs. Net.exe. What is net used for? Map a drive. Yeah, exactly. Good. So this is us reconstructing everything that's happened on one machine. We get a little bit. We count how many times net was run. But as forensic examiners, we go into the trenches. We go down rabbit holes, and we'll start. Oh, he ran net again. And again. Oh my God. Oh, I wonder what he's doing. We get so into the weeds. We have to be pulled back out like hunting dogs. Like hunting dogs, forensic examiners. So don't laugh at me as I go through each command that the attacker ran. And we were able to reconstruct this from event logs because we had detailed process logging turned on. So we got net being run 3 times, most likely mapping a drive, but could be creating a user, net user. So NS lookup, what does that do? Nice, task list. What do you think he's doing there? Exactly what I was talking about with the remote system reconnaissance. He wants to know what's running on the box. Exactly. So DS query and DS get. Anyone familiar with those?
Querying the active directory.
Querying the active directory. Very nice, Carlos. Excellent. But something is notable here because DS get is not a typical tool that's on a box. It's not part of the active directory set. It's something you can download later. Now, to find a directory called program data, which is legitimate, but an ask directory in the program data, what are we looking at here? Yeah, this has been uploaded or dropped onto the system that he owns. This is part of his toolkit. This is exciting because it helps us scan the rest of the network to do proper scoping. Where else can we find the ask directory in the program data folder? It's awesome. It's so exciting to find something like this that was not on the system before but has been placed there by the attacker. Very cool. We have net being run several more times. Expand. Expand.
Opening a cab file.
Nice. Opening a cab file. RAR being run 3 times, and this is where you're like, holy crap. Let this be a RAR X, right? Don't let this be something being archived. Let him have dropped something that he's expanding. Don't let it, because what's going to happen next if he's archiving something? He's going to be exfilling it, right? He's going to package up everything that's notable and exfil it out, and that's not what we want. So net being run 4 times. Yeah, incredible reconstruction of attacker activity. And we were able to do this from the event logs with detailed process logging. some of those were lateral movement techniques. So exfiltration can happen many different ways. FTP, web-based drop systems, sometimes there'll be a collection system. And if you can run it like on the remote network, there'll be one machine where everything was collected and exfilled from. But when I created this slide, it was proof of concept to have Dropbox being used, right? But now people are really starting to look at Dropbox and saying, maybe that is a potential leak out of our network, right? Yeah, so maybe not proof of concept anymore. And then Wikipedia, someone wrote about this Wikipedia, like, what is that page that keeps track of all the notes on a Wikipedia entry? It's like the changelog or something, we'll call it. No one ever looks at that. So you could post things there and exfil them later. So, this whole collection point, that it's a collection point that's out there in the public domain, but no one's going to look at it. So if you have the timing down, you can pull the data that you're looking for as it's being exfilled. Awesome stuff. So how do I spot these techniques? Detecting the bad guys. And I'll do a system check. Hey, that's good to see you. I recognize you. You got your shirt on? No, the staff shirt. I have, 15 minutes? Is that right, Kyle? 15 minutes to talk to you, to try to define my job as a forensic examiner. Ridiculous, right? Ridiculous. But nonetheless, I will attempt to fit it in so we can all eat. I break these things down into 3 parts of my investigation. I'm looking for evidence of execution. All right? That'll be the first section. Artifacts of reconnaissance. So I'm trying to answer the question for the attacker or for the customer. What did they come for? What were they looking for? All right, there's going to be ways we can find evidence of that on the remote system. And then finally, file system trace artifacts. Trace artifacts are a consequence of the attacker getting a little bit more sophisticated with his cleanup. We were discussing this earlier with, hey, batch wiping is for real. I have to rely on trace artifacts. I have to know NTFS. What? NTFS, I have to know NTFS, the Windows file system, I have to know it better than the attacker. Is someone revolting? As I told you. What? We don't know NTFS at all. No. So that's what's happening. As the attacker becomes more sophisticated in their cleanup techniques, even if you're talking about a rogue user who's doing all kinds of crazy on your network, another employee you might be charged with investigating, they're going to do a pretty good cleanup job. Your job as a forensic examiner is to know NTFS so well you know where to go to get those trace artifacts, to reconstruct what used to be in the file system, knowing that the data is no longer there, only references within the file system to the fact that the data once existed. That's what I mean by trace artifacts. So we'll go through the first category. Of course, evidence of execution is going to start with looking at Prefetch. Now, I taught analysts. I live in the DC area, so I did teach some analysts that were befuddled to learn the whole, I drop into a shell and I create a Prefetch file. So where Prefetch files are created, if the service is turned on the Windows system, typically it is these days, if I execute something, a Prefetch file is created and placed in the Windows Prefetch directory. There's a reason for it. It's all about efficiency. So if I'm using a platter drive versus a solid state drive, I want to best place the data that's required upon the execution of an application. I want to place it together on the platter. It actually is an implementation that Windows does to launch applications faster. Now, why doesn't this come into play with solid state drives?
Because they don't have platters.
They don't have platters.
At all.
Yeah, they're not as slow as that, what is that called? That head moving across the platters. It doesn't have to worry about that. So we actually have, if Windows senses that it's installed on a solid state drive, it doesn't even have this service turned on. So there will be no Prefetch files if Windows knows it's installed on a solid state drive. So I throw that caveat in there before we start getting really excited about the evidence that you can find in Prefetch. I almost revolt. I almost turn down work if there's no Prefetch directory. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, it's so frustrating to come upon a machine and try to reconstruct what the user or the attacker has done when you don't have evidence of execution, particularly in the Prefetch directory. I worked one investigation where the Prefetch directory was being flushed daily. So typically, I mean, you're looking at 128 apps that are tracked on systems prior to Windows 8. So if that's being flushed daily, how much historical evidence am I able to reconstruct as to what's been run on that system? Yeah, 1 day's worth. It doesn't go back very far. So that sucks. But know that 128 prefetch files are created and maintained on versions of Windows up to Windows 8, but now we have 1,024 in versions of Windows 8. It's very exciting. So if someone talks to you about prefetch files, it's evidence of execution. And there's even a run count that's associated with these prefetch files. So, oh, I'm sorry? Windows prefetch. So C:\Windows\prefetch directory, and then they're just PF files. So there's a lot of data. I show one being parsed here. I'm actually parsing the SBC host.exe. We looked at this yesterday a bit. This is a malicious SBC host.exe. Even Sarah was talking about this being a common malware. Malware will name their files, their binaries, SBC host.exe, and why? Can there be more than one SBC host running on a box? Oh yeah. So it's easy to blend in when my malware is named SBC host.exe, because there's going to be more than one no matter what. So if I throw another one in, the typical forensic examiner is not going to catch it without doing deep dive analysis. So you see here, there's a prefetch file created for every SBC host.exe that's run from different locations. So this one is actually in the DLL host directory inside of System32. Where is the typical SBC host.exe running from? System32. So there's actually, if I'm looking at all of the prefetch files in the prefetch directory, I'm going to have two. One for the legitimate SBC host and one for this crazy one that's in a different directory. Awesome. I run a parsing tool and I can get access to all of the files that are accessed within a 10-second window of SBC host.exe kicking off. That's what the prefetch directory or prefetch file is doing, the prefetch service. It's like a tracker. The next time I run this SBC host, it will know to preload or have these files at the ready because they were touched last time I ran this application. So that's nerd knowledge, right? Until you start looking at the files that were accessed. Can you guys see this, the last entry down here?
Yeah.
That's another executable. So if I know that SBC host, this one that I'm looking at, the prefetch file of, is rogue, if I look at the files that are accessed in that 10-second window, I can spot a second stage of the malware. This is actually another malicious binary that exists on the system I have full path to. So one bit of information is going to lead to the next step in my investigation. Awesome, awesome stuff. And then I also have a run count and the last time it was run, being preserved in the prefetch file. Again, this is such valuable information that I really get pissed off if I don't have it, right? Servers, 2008 server has prefetch turned off by default. So there's going to be certain versions of Windows where you're not going to have this information on this service running. So the next one I'm going to talk about, more evidence of execution, is the one I was talking to Carlos about earlier. Application compatibility cache. Have you seen the option, I think it came around with XP, to run a program under legacy conditions? So if you have an old school program and you're trying to run it on Windows 7, it'll say, hey, requires, XP compatibility. You actually have to flag it to run under the XP parameters. And that's what application compatibility cache is. It's part of, it's a bunch of registry keys entered in the system hive that tracks the conditions under which an application has to be run. Well, how is it valuable for us as forensic examiners reconstructing what the bad guy did in our system? Well, every time a new application is run, it creates this entry in the registry, which is awesome, right? I need a parse. So if you're interested, that's where you're going to look for that app compats cache. This is evidence of execution, and this is me parsing this hive. I think I have this blown up too. Yeah. So each of these entries is indicative of something being run for the first time on this system. So you can see here, some of them I can just throw out, like Outlook Express setup 50. That's probably normal. But some of these are a bit more anomalous. Like I've never heard of spinlock.exe. Sometimes evil will just pop out at you, like the randomly named XPKE, randomly named executables from a user's temp directory. probably something you want to look into, right? So app compat cache. The next one is scheduled task analysis. We spoke a little bit about scheduled tasks, typically used for lateral movement, but evidence of execution nonetheless, right? I can, from patient 0, I can create a task on another machine. A task that'll kick off that malware in the next couple minutes. And I can create a task under system credentials. So we'll have no problem running that said application. So if you find scheduled tasks, particularly we look for a mandate, we had an indicator of compromise that we'd scan our customer environments looking for scheduled tasks that started with AT. AT is a result of the AT command, kind of old school, at.exe. But have you seen the APT1 report that Mandiant put out? APT1 used this technique for lateral movement quite consistently. So if I ran across a job that was named AT1.job, I'd want to get in there and figure out what it was kicking off. Realize scheduled tasks can be run on interval. There could be all types of triggers associated with a scheduled task. So here I'm showing you a job parser Python script written by Jamie Levy. She wrote this to clean up the scheduled task so I can make fast work of figuring out what executable is being launched, right? And under what parameters it's being kicked off by. So realize this data is there for us, evidence of execution, which might be tied to how that second, third, fourth, fifth machine got owned. Next one is text-based console commands. A lot of people get excited about this. This is really cool. Reconstructing what was entered in a terminal window. Very awesome. So I was discussing this yesterday when I was talking about Volatility. Volatility has a couple of different plugins. Now, Volatility is a framework that parses memory images. If you've heard of it, it is bleeding edge stuff. They're constantly coming out with new plugins. So if you have a memory image, which is often collected when you're doing incident response, you want to find out what was running on the system at the time of the response. You collect a memory image and then you could parse it using the Volatility framework. Command Scan is the plugin that gives you access to, if that data is there, what was entered in a terminal window. So the things that were entered in a terminal window here, I like to make fun of this because one of my buddies created a memory image and I went back and I was like, whoa, ha, ha, what did he do wrong here? These are commands, this is command history access. Exactly, he misspelled ipconfig, this is Rob. I like to say that this is Rob with his big fingers, you know, like he fat fingered something. IPO config. Exactly! Oh yeah, so yeah, typically people will laugh at that. But what about this? I know only half of you can see this. What is this indicative of? And Carlos cannot answer.
That's post-system
Yes? So what is BSS? This is too much caffeine right here, but BSS admin lists shadows. What am I doing there? BSS admin, BSS. List volume shadow copies. That's what BSS admin does. So I'm listing the volume shadow copies, and then I'm going through and what is copy? But what is that? The system. The system hive. Right. So I grab the system hive. I grab the SAM hive. These are two registry. I'm actually pulling copies of the registry out of volume shadow copies. Why can't I make copies of the ones that are current on the machine now? Why do I have to go back and... They're locked. They're constantly being written to. These things are loaded up in memory and constantly being written to. Yeah, I mean, you can get lower level access to the file system and grab them. But in this case, this is a fast way to do it. I copy the one that's in the volume shadow copy based on which volume shadow copy I'm interested in. So I'm listing the shadows. And then what is this? ntds.dit. You did not answer the question. If someone, we need to pound him when we get on the call. He just tell us again, Carlos, because we knew you knew this, but
the Active Directory database.
He says the Active Directory database. So what machine would this be being run on? All of this remote shell dropped into it. This is the domain controller that has the ntds.dit. That is in fact the directory services that get synced across all domain controllers. It has all of the credentials. As long as you have the ability to unlock or
and one of the things that happens is that when you install the domain controller for the first time, that admin password gets saved to the SAM file. When you do a DC promo, that password is the same one that is used for the administrator account for the entire domain. So if you're able to identify the domain controller with the visible roles for infrastructure master, which is the first domain controller that is installed in that environment, chances are more than likely that you can get that account directly from that SAN file to control the entire domain controller from. So it will save you time from cracking NTDS.net.
Yeah, so you're looking for the admin password or password hash here, account hashes, and then you're going to apply them here. Damn, man, thank you. That's awesome. But sure enough, realize I'm pulling this out of memory. I'm reconstructing what is in memory image. What was entered in a terminal window, I dumped memory and I'm pulling it out. That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's command scan. So event logs, reconstructing event logs, I don't have too much to say about this, other than with detailed process logging. It's an option to turn on. You might want to look into it. Again, Dexter Morgan is running some simple backdoor, but you can see the execution of the backdoor, the shape. You can see it because I have detailed process logging on this system, the remote system that the attacker's on. But what is the problem with detailed process logging? If I'm going to be tracking execution of every process that kicks off on a box, yeah.
That's going to be a lot to look at.
Enormous logs, right? Enormous logs. So that's your problem, not mine. I merely tell you how we can retrace or reconstruct the attacker. Yeah, attacker activity. You have to implement detailed process logging, figure out a way to archive all of this stuff. And that's typically our issue, is we don't have much historical data if there's a set size for endpoint logs. If we're going to implement detailed process logging, we've got to figure that out. We've got to archive this stuff or syslog it, centralize the logging. But sure enough, you're able to reconstruct all of this. It's awesome. Very exciting stuff when you run into it. So again, I've done a lot of intrusion investigations. I point out some of my favorite Windows 7 logs, Windows 7 and beyond logs, because it's not as easy as security system application anymore, is it? Have you looked at the Windows 7 logs? Some of you have. There are crazy amounts of logs now on our modern versions of Windows. Some of them are, that I have are my favorites. Terminal Services Local Manager. It tracks when someone remote desktops onto a system. And it can preserve the actual connecting IP address. So if they're coming in from another network or another subnet, I can grab that IP and therefore trace back who remote desktoped onto my target system. UAC. You ever created a UAC event, Carlos? You ever created a UAC shunting or file virtualization? Have you ever done that?
No.
So this happens when the attacker, they might be on the box remotely. They might be writing in a process owned by a user. So they have user-level privileges. They don't have system privileges. They don't have admin privileges. And they try to write to a protected directory like the System32, the Windows directory. I think even Windows even balks when you try to write directly to the root of C. So if I, as the attacker, try to download my tool, or upload, regardless of how you look at it, to one of these protected directories, it flags because I don't have proper credentials. I haven't done a UAC bypass or a privilege escalation. So I get shunted and I'm creating logs of my activity, which is not what you want to do as the attacker, but it's something you need to know about as a forensic examiner on the flip side to figure out attacker activity. Because they might have been a little bit too motivated to drop their tools on the box, and they didn't UAC bypass or privilege escalate before they tried to drop said toolkit. So that's one place to look. Another one, of course, is Task Scheduler. Because our newer versions of Windows don't keep track of things the way the old ones did. They actually have their own log. So look at these. These are my favorites. When we get into stacking analytics for evidence of execution, this is more for the hunters. Is anyone in a hunting role in their environment? Oh, Kyle puts his hand up. So hunting, you don't know for sure that you're owned, but you need to go and scan the network, maybe pull back some data that would give you some evidence that, maybe something did run on this system that we didn't know about based on snort alerts or indicators of compromised scans or anything else that we had going on proactively. So what would you want to pull back data? If you could have 1,000 machines and pull 1,000 machines for particular data, what would you target if you were going to stack the same information across the board and do analytics?
Well, like you said, the scheduled task.
Scheduled tasks. I like that. Yeah. So if I pull back all the scheduled tasks and look for AT and then a number, .job, yeah, that's awesome. Others, application compatibility stacking. I have some examples to show you. Scheduled tasks, prefetch, and service stacking. Service, persistence, 70% of malware uses service persistence. That's crazy. Let me pull back all the services on my 1,000 machines and see if any of them are one-offs. Because is it going to be the predominance of data? I mean, is it going to be the things that are most prevalent on your network that are most notable? Unless all of your machines are owned, that would be a sad state. It's going to be the things that occur least frequently. So I have my data here that I pulled back. This is an internal management tool that we use for data stacking, but I threw in some data that's been sanitized, hopefully. So I'm looking at things that occur most frequently, and this is Prefetch. So I pulled back all the Prefetch files across an entire environment, and I'm stacking it by most frequently occurring. So is this going to be notable? NTOS boot.pf. User init, reg svr. These are common, aren't they? I flip it, I turn it upside down. Now I have sorted by the least frequency of occurrence. Now it gets a little bit more juicy. Setup.exe. Which setup.exe is that? Update.exe, update. Run DLL32, update. Again, these are one-offs. These are probably the things that exist in the user's temp directory that either attempted to own said user or are actually running on the system now that we haven't otherwise been able to identify. So this is a hunting technique, and I say that because a lot of organizations don't have time for hunting, man, right? I mean, you're hooking and jabbing and you're being constantly bombarded with work. To actually create work for yourself, that's what hunting is sometimes, right? Going and pulling back data. Typically we're getting data thrown at us. Like, yeah, that machine is beaconing out actively. You need to hit that machine, stop hunting, because they're actually owned. So that was my summary of evidence of execution. The other two sections are lighter, so hang in there. We're almost done. This is artifacts of reconnaissance. So evidence of execution was what did the attacker run on the box? Now it's like, what did he look for? So Shellback Activity. When you open a Windows Explorer, just your friends have done it. I know that some of you have not ever done that. But open a Windows Explorer and you traverse directories, right? You traverse directories and maybe you go out on the network. You go out on a removable device. You want to go on your E drive, you plug in a USB, and you're traversing directories. Is that being tracked by the Windows registry? You totally is. I'm here to tell you that's how law enforcement does the reconstruction of encrypted volumes. They might not have access to the encrypted volume, but what do they have access to?
The path.
Yeah, the paths, exactly. They can reconstruct the directory structure of the encrypted volume based on something, well, some of it, is done with shellbacks. So shellbacks is what I was describing to you. I open a Windows Explorer and I start traversing through these directory structures. Criminals, they'll have a TrueCrypt volume mounted and they'll traverse through the directory structures, whether it be illicit images or the exploits, anything that would be actionable. I can reconstruct the directory structure because Shellback Activity is written to their ntuser.dat, their actual user profile registry hive. All right, so that's something I look for because some of our attackers do remote desktop onto a system. So they get a GUI and they start using Windows Explorer. In fact, some of our attackers will be as bold as to use the browser on that remote system. I'm not playing. We've actually found evidence of browser history or browser activity with the attacker using the remote network's bandwidth to get out and look things up as to how they're going to take their next step. So that's what we have. The shellback artifacts are just that. I give you the path here. Search query artifacts. Yes, there are more sophisticated techniques to search what's on a system or on a network, but why not make use of the native Windows search features? Can I find out what a user has searched for using Windows search? I certainly can. It's in the ntuser.dat or the user class.dat. So we got XP is going to be a hive or a key called ACMRU. With Windows 7 and Windows 8, there's something called word wheel query. So how sophisticated is, well, there's a word wheel query being shown for you here, and I'm opening up the ntuser.dat with my registry viewer. Ooh, I thought I had another slide. Ooh, but to figure out what the attacker is actually searching for, this answers the question that the customer wanted in the first place. Why did he come? Right? What was it? What did he want? What was he interested in? And that really can be very illuminating. So the next one I'm going to talk about is file system trace artifacts. And this is where I blow your mind. This is where you actually leave hurt. And maybe you won't even be able to eat. You know, maybe you'll be like, oh man, I'm sick. So I talk about, have you ever seen, I mean, Vista, that's probably what turned you guys away from Windows to begin with, but Vista had a problem with indexing, right? It was always running in the background, indexing everything to make it really fast if you were doing a search. That was the point. But indexing has since been improved to the point where it is so comprehensive and in the weeds, it uses this very sophisticated back-end database. You know, I've heard of attackers making use of the back-end database. I'm serious. They don't have to use the search query. They can just query the search database and figure out what's on the system. The granularity of the search database, you can actually query sticky notes. You can query emails that have been opened on a system. Incredible granularity here. As you can see, emails, documents, contacts can be queried. This is all kept in a back-end database. So as an examiner, I want to know, can I parse this stuff? So I'm going to show you me parsing it. And be able to reconstruct here what was in the database at one point in time. I will tell you now, as I blow this up, that there is currently only one RAR file on this system at the time I'm doing this investigation. So I take the windows.edb file and I parse it with a tool written by Joachim Metz, who works for Google. Joachim Metz did the backend libraries that allow me to get in there and parse this stuff. I'm able to find out that not only was there this one that's currently on the system, there was a whole bunch of other RAR files. Do I need to be worried about RAR files if I'm doing an intrusion investigation? Yeah, it's one of the categories of information I should be worried about. So realize that the search database, it's an index service that runs, but there's definitely historical data in there that can tell you, this is again, trace artifacts. The stuff existed at one point in time. So here it is again, that's current state. There's just one RAR file, that's current state being pulled. USN Journal, heard of the USN Journal? I know the Unix people think they have it up on Windows, well, lovers, because they're like, well, we were the first to transactional database or transactional journal. So if the Unix or Linux system crashes, it has the ability to come up and figure out what it was doing. To either redo or undo an action that only halfway completed. Well, Windows has that too. It's called, well, the $log file, but also the $USN Journal. The USN Journal is kept as part of the NTFS. It can grow to gigs in size. So it's actually a historical view of what's happened on the system. So the attacker drops a tool, gets their task completed, and deletes the tool. There's very little evidence left in the clusters, the data clusters, of the existence of that tool, right? Actually, there's nothing left because he wiped where the tool existed. What I'm telling you is the USN Journal will have evidence of the fact that that file system has touched, accessed, created, deleted those files. So I have a tool that I use, it's called JP, and it will get in there and parse the USN Journal. So this is what I used to find, when I was doing a malware intrusion investigation, I actually found the keylogger based on looking at the USN Journal. So let me describe this to you. This was a whole deal of hijacking scenario where nvsmart.exe is the SOGU malware sample. nvsmart.exe was a legitimate NVIDIA executable. So it was signed. It was legitimate. So how does an attacker make use of a legitimate signed